Hello, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of That NextGen Planners Podcast with me, Amelia Hamilton, alongside my brilliant co-hosts Taylor Beavis.
Hello.
And Clara Metcalf.
Hi.
And this week we have a brilliant guest joining us in the form of the one, the only, it's Jo Wall. Welcome to the podcast.
Hello. Thank you.
You started off just by waving then, and I was going to have to say it is an audio medium, Jo, so perhaps some dialogue.
I forget.
No, perfect.
I talk with my hands. You'll just have to live with it.
Yeah, you and me both. I often get, especially Dan Graham will tell me off for gesticulating too much and getting very worked up. But yeah, I usually have to sit on my hands to try and stop that from happening. But anyway, enough about me. It's about you. Let's start by, in case people don't know who you are or where you sit in financial planning, do you want to give a bit of background of what you do?
Yeah, cool. Okay, so I am Jo. Hi, nice to meet you all. I don't know what to talk about myself. Let's start with the obvious bits. So I have been in financial planning or financial services for coming up for 11 years now. I have worked in various different roles, from consumer credit in Barclays Bank through to being a mortgage consultant specialising in investment and buy-to-let development commercial finance, paraplanner, all the way up to now working as a business owner, financial planner, financial coach, and just general admin and a dog mum. So yeah, that is me in a bit of a whistle-stop tour, but absolutely loving everything that's happening at the moment. Been self-employed for about 18 months, and it's an experience, but I'm loving it, and it means that I can get to do fun things like this on a Tuesday afternoon and do it completely guilt-free, which is great.
And Jo, first of all, congrats on your kind of start of this 18 months. Well done. Have you found it hard? What's been the biggest challenge that you found?
Yes, I have found it hard, but I mean also super, super rewarding, and I wouldn't change it for the world. I think the main reason I found it difficult was because in classic Jo form, I went against all standard advice, which is I did not have a plan, and I went, sod this, if the industry isn't going to fix it, I'm going to fix it, so I need to hand my notice in and do it myself, and then went, oh yeah, you need to have saved up for 6 months and done all of those sensible things before you go self-employed. And I did not do those things. Luckily, I had a bit of savings and stuff like that. So yeah, it was a little bit of a trial by fire, let's put it that way. But I've loved it. And it's been, I think actually that's made me almost better at it, because I didn't have any preconceptions. I was like, do you know what? I'm just going to go into it open-minded, figure it out and see what happens. So yeah. It's been a journey, and it feels so much longer than 18 months.
Yeah, I bet the time drags.
But yeah, so it feels a bit weird saying that.
Yeah. And how, in terms of your setup at the moment, you sort of touched on what you're doing at the moment. Are you part of a network? Are you directly authorised?
Yeah, so I am. I'm a network. I'm under a network for a couple of reasons. Partly because when I originally went self-employed, was two main factors actually. I didn't have CAS at the time, so that was quite a big barrier. And also I was toying about whether or not I actually wanted to stay in the regulated space and whether I wanted to carry on doing proper regulated financial services. I was very much kind of the opinion when I left and handed in my notice that I was going to go and be a financial coach and just leave the regulated world behind. But then I slowly started realizing, as I was talking to more and more financial coaches and I started doing the coaching qualification, that there was this kind of gap in the middle. And it's not the advice gap that's different, but it's this gap where you've got financial coaches on the non-reg side doing this amazing work and getting clients that wouldn't necessarily have access to standard financial services and financial planning and regulated advice, getting them to this really good place where they're engaging with the need for it. But generally they tend to charge on an hourly or session basis. Then on the other side of the gap, you've got regulated financial advice and financial planning, wealth management, whatever you want to call it. And there are some that understand and see the need for the financial coaching, and there's some that are trying to kind of fit it into their businesses. But because of the way the classic advice kind of model is set up, it's very much you need to have assets. And if you don't have assets, then there's not really much option out there other than a bit of financial coaching. Yes, there are some financial planners that will do non-reg cash flow and things like that, but that only gets you to a certain point. So the more I kind of realised that there was this sort of gap in the middle where there wasn't much happening, I was like, well, I can sit in that gap. I'm chartered and fellow with 10 years worth of experience that also happens to have got bored of not doing exams and decided to go and do a financial coaching course. So I was like, cool, I can sit on the fence of both the regulated and the non-regulated side of the industry. And that's when I was like, cool, okay, there's my business plan. Kind of looking at like these amazing coaches and these amazing planners being like, okay, how can I use the knowledge and experience that I've gained from the hours of studying and all of the hard work that went into the exams and qualifications from a regulated perspective, and also my experience and knowledge and all of that kind of stuff as well. But then also kind of bolt on this fantastic piece of non-reg work that helps maybe lower level asset clients or younger clients, things like that. Because I ultimately wanted to help people that were like me, that were in their late 20s, early 30s, you know, able to save a decent bit, had an all right pension through work, still needed the advice and the regulated bit, but didn't necessarily have the 200 grand in a pension that could be managed by a wealth manager somewhere. So that is where Joyful Wealth was born, which is my company. So yeah, it was a little bit by accident, but I feel like it was an educated accident, if that makes sense. It was like, I'm just going to figure it out. So yeah, loving it.
So when you decided to go out on your own, obviously you had to wait to get the CAS status. Well, it's not really CAS anymore, is it? But you had to wait to go through the various sort of sign-offs and have a certain amount of things be looked at and approved before you could actually be given the go-ahead. How did you, given that you had no plan before, manage to, you know, keep the lights on during that period? Was it very much leaning into that coaching side during that period? So a little bit. So in terms of timeline, I left my employed role on at the end of February, beginning of March. And then I started doing the financial coaching qualification in April 23, and I finished it in June. So I was like, cool, okay, I've got probably 6 to 12 months worth of savings that I can kind of live off. Maybe some of it I need to put into the business, maybe some of it I need to do other bits. I am very fortunate that my other half is in the military, so he's got a recession-proof job and a decent amount to be able to kind of keep the lights on at home and do those kind of bits, which is really good. And also, I was really fortunate as a business owner that he buggered off on tour for 6 months. So it meant that from December of 2023, I was like, cool, I can be really selfish with my time and keep costs to an absolute minimum because I'm not going to have a social life else either way. So that was quite fortunate. But yeah, so for the first, I got my FCA permissions in July of last year, 2023. So I've only really been officially regulated and authorised for just over a year now. It was very much, like you say, relying on doing a few mortgages because I'm obviously using that experience from before where they're quite easy to do. There is obviously regulated advice, but you can do it as a bit more transactional, a bit more one-off. But yeah, a lot of it was the coaching side of things. And I separate my service out a little bit. And that was where having a network was really useful. And particularly the network that I'm with were quite open to different business models and charging structures, and they weren't super prescriptive on how we did things, because it was really important to me that, again, going back to some of the previous conversations I had with financial coaches and the financial planners that do the coaching as a side bit, they almost separate them out. So they've got two separate businesses. They've got the regulated and the non-regulated for various different reasons. So it was really nice to be able to go, actually, I have made my proposition work so that the non-regulated coaching and cash flow side of it ties into the regulated side. And so I still follow the regulated process. I just don't charge regulated
size fees for it, if that makes sense. So it kind of works really nicely where it's sort of, I hate using like the financial planning light thing that's kind of become a thing in the last couple of years, but that is almost what it is. Like, I'll still do a risk profile questionnaire with some of my coaching clients just as an education tool, for example. But because I charge that on a monthly basis, my financial planning / coaching bit of the business is paid as a subscription model retainer on a monthly fee. Yeah, I mean, it takes time to build that up, but it was like, 50 quid here or there with a couple of mortgages thrown in, all of a sudden the business starts building. And then obviously now I'm kind of a bit further along the line. I'm very much back into doing the regulated piece, so still able to do pension stuff, still able to do some of the investment based stuff. So it's really nice having that balance, but it's nice to have a little bit of income coming in each month that is non-market driven because it's a fixed fee, monthly fee. But then also you've got the life insurance business and the mortgage side of things that pay quite nice commissions and procuration fees, but it's like a 3 to 6 month cash flow because they don't get paid for, well, with the mortgage, it's how long is a piece of string until the mortgage completes, right? So I feel like the last 12 months have been more of a proof of concept of being able to go, okay, people buy into it, people believe in it, people see the benefit in it. More importantly, though, what does it pay for it? And the rest of it's kind of coming from there, basically. So going back to your original question, keeping the lights on was partly choosing my partner very well, as far as his job is concerned, and just trying to box a little bit clever does mean that I've had to massively scrimp down on my spending. So yeah. But I think in a way that's made it more relatable to some of the clients that I'm working with on a financial coaching perspective, because they're like, I feel like I have no money and I don't have anything to do anything fun. And I'm like, me neither. Both of us. Obviously don't necessarily tell them that much.
Looking at the clients that you work with, I'm really interested on the reg side I'm talking here. So for kind of the wealth regulated advice that you give, what type of client avatar, if you like, excites you the most? What type of client could walk through out the door and you think, yeah, this is my type of client?
I can't necessarily answer that just from a regulated business side of things, because to me the whole idea of what I was trying to do is get people that are at either younger or the lower end of the journey, but like the starting point of their journey, and then grow with them and build with them. So I've got a couple of clients that are really good examples of that, where I think it was actually the second client I ever signed up was a friend of a friend. She approached me because she is living in London, was earning a decent chunk of money, but did what is quite a difficult thing to do, which is leave a job for a lower paid job because it's the right thing from a work-life balance and an energy and well-being perspective. Didn't like the previous employer that she was working with, and basically realised that actually the paycheck was nice, but it wasn't worth the stress. So she'd much rather move to a different company that paid her, I think it was between 5 and 10 grand less per year. Obviously in London, that makes a really big difference. So the original conversations that we had were very much around, how do I live my life on 5 to 10 grand less? I think let's call it 10 grand because it was definitely more than 5. So how do I live my lifestyle in London, wanting to buy a house, wanting to do all of these things because I've only just turned 30. How do you do that with 10 grand a year less? So a lot of it was kind of financial education of understanding budgeting and basic income and expenditure and balancing things like that. But then as we worked together, about 3 or so months after we started working together and the budgeting and everything was kind of trickling along, she rings me and she goes, I didn't think I was going to actually ever have this conversation with you because it's been that long in the waiting. And I was like, I have no idea where this is going. But long story short, grandparents had passed away, and the probate of the, I think it was grandmother's estate, had taken something like 2.5 years to get through. And she was like, the solicitor emailed me last week saying that my inheritance was being paid in a week, and I just ignored it thinking it wasn't going to happen because we've had so many false starts, but I've just had 150 grand land in my bank account. What the hell do I do with it? Wasn't quite the language she used, but basically, like, please help. And she'd not told me anything about this before. Like, it was all very much like day-to-day budgeting. We hadn't even got to the point of having that kind of wider, bigger picture conversation yet. And so part of what we did was we then sat down and had a look at, well, she lives in London, property's expensive, how much is she going to need for a property and this, that and the other. So we made a plan. We put some of it in premium bonds and this and, put it all in safe places because she knew that she wanted to buy a house in the next 3-ish years. Fast forward a couple of months, she gets a promotion at work. She then needs help negotiating salary. We're able to do that as part of the financial planning bit. Then she realises that she's got 5 pensions that are dotted about and she wants to understand them. So you can see how all of a sudden what started off as basic income, expenditure, budgeting, money management stuff is now starting to build into this conversation around regulated products. So fast forward not quite 12 months, she's been looking for a house in London for the last 2 months on the basis that she needs a mortgage. That's something that I can help her with. I've got letters of authority out, looking at all of her pensions to be able to assess them and make sure that they're being invested properly. Even though I might not necessarily consolidate them because I haven't actually got the information back to be able to do it, I'm still able to give her that regulated piece of advice, even though the original conversation was around money management and budgeting. And that, for me, is the power of what I can do. Because your standard financial advisor would go, cool, okay, you just had 150 grand land in your bank account from the solicitors. Let's have a look, do a bit of a cash flow. Oh, wait, you're 30. We can't really do a cash flow because our cash flow models are set up for people in retirement. So, all right, we'll do some kind of back of an envelope figures for you. And we'll charge you 1,500 quid for it because we can't invest the 150 grand anyway because you need it. Like, it's been really nice to be able to give her the advice that she needs, help her build a plan and get her to a point where she's now looking at buying property in the space of 12 months.
Yeah,
and she's paid me a monthly fee for it.
Yeah. So cool as well. And to have someone like that at the beginning of their journey as well, like who knows what's going to happen in 10 years, and the fact that you can really feel like you've made a difference to this person and been able to see the results of your work from however many years ago. I was wondering, how much does your coaching background then influence how you deliver your advice and financial planning? How much is that kind of a symbiotic relationship, or is it very separate in your mind?
It's not separate at all. I would say that I use some form of coaching technique in pretty much every single client meeting. And that can be things like, let me take a step back. So the regulated exams teach you the technical stuff. They teach you the gumph, the jargon, the important stuff, the regulation. I'm not denying that that isn't necessary. But what it doesn't teach you is how to handle conversations, how to handle challenging a client when maybe what they're saying and what they're doing don't match up with each other. That's where the financial coaching piece is really, really, I think, integral to what I do. And I'm aware that this might come across as a bit arrogant or a bit whatever, but I've always been told that I'm good at reading people, and I'm quite good at at people skills. I've always been told I had quite good people skills. But what was really nice with the financial coaching side of things is it gave me a toolkit, it gave me actual things to work through that you can go, okay, I need this client to realize that their actions and their words are doing two very different things, but it's not necessarily for me to tell them that. So how can I make them realize that for themselves through the power of silence, through the power of questioning, through the power of kind of thoughtful but gentle challenging, all of that kind of stuff. And so that's where I think the financial coaching side has been invaluable, because, you get, like, I had really good examples. I had a lady come up to me a couple of weeks ago. She was like, I need to speak to you about my pension. And I was like, you don't need to talk to me about your pension. That's what you think you need to talk to me about. That's what you've been told you need to talk to a financial planner about. And actually, because of then being able to use some of the coaching tools, when I did meet with her to have, my kind of initial meeting with her, she was like, I don't have any savings. I don't have a pension. My business is doing well, but it's not able to pay me an income. I am aware that I'm a 50-year-old woman and I can't retire and I haven't got a pension. And it's like, okay, so you coming to me and saying you need to talk to me about a pension is actually the tip of the iceberg. How do we then, and the media will get this, how do we get to the bummock of the iceberg? How do we get to the detail? How do we get to that bit? Okay, questions, pausing. That's where the coaching bit comes in. So for me, it's, even if I'm talking about the regulated side, it's still being able to tie it back into actually what's important. Yes, I might be talking to you about an investment proposition or consolidating your pensions and doing this from a regulated advice piece. But that doesn't mean that I can't use that skill set to make it mean something rather than just, I'm Jo and I'm here to talk to you about your pension and investments and put you to sleep.
So I'm gonna play. In fact, if for anyone who watches the morning commute on the Friday mornings, I'm gonna do a Jo Wall and play devil's advocate right now. And we've all met, and we all know financial planners who very much believe that coaching is a new fad. It's not where the value is. It's not what, I guess generates the fees or gets the results. So what's your opinion on where people say, actually financial planning is becoming a little bit too woolly. We're getting a bit too close to therapy now, and we should just be focusing on the products.
I think there's space for everyone. There is enough people out there that need advice.
She's good. Yeah, she is good.
I do genuinely believe that, because I'll say to my clients, for example, I am qualified in all of these different areas. I'm authorized in all of these areas. However, if you want to sit there and talk to me about individual stock picking and going down into the real detail of the investments, I am not the financial planner for you. That is where you need an asset manager, an investment manager, a wealth manager, whatever it is. So I am all for meeting clients where they are rather than where you think they should be. So, for example, I've worked in various different financial planning firms, and you can see the clients that come in and they need that hand-holding, the kind of pseudo-therapy, let's call it, the coaching, that bit. They need someone to be that bit of an anchor from a financial services perspective of going, I don't understand it, I need help, I need support. Cool, okay. There are people for that. That's the kind of camp that I sit in. I want to be able to stop people stressing and improve their well-being, that kind of thing. But at the same time, there are some people, because of the way different learning styles are, different personality types, there are some people that are super analytical, that just need the headline bits, that just need that, or just need the detail in whatever. They need to really understand it. I am all for the fact that there is wealth managers, let's call them, because I think that's probably the best way to describe them, that do that. But then it's up to everybody to kind of stay in their lane, because I have no problem with wealth managers. I think they're an absolutely essential part of our industry. I have no problem with any of the different financial advisors, coaches, whatever we want to call ourselves. But I think it's understanding where you sit within the industry rather than saying what I'm doing is better than what you're doing. It's different, and different is good. Because if you look at the statistics, the advice gap is only getting bigger, and the advice gap is getting bigger because people don't understand what we're able to do for them, and they think they can do it themselves. There is a lot of things consumers can do themselves, and I'm not disagreeing with that. However, that doesn't mean that if someone has really poor financial well-being, is really anxious and stressing about money, that me sitting there and talking about emotions and the behavioural side of it is doing any less or more of an important job than you are managing that business owner that's super analytical investments and just needs that and doesn't actually want the wishy-washy financial planning, coaching, therapy bit. That's fine. For me, the bit that bugs me about it all is people don't like change. We're hardwired not to like change, and I get that. And I think a lot of the time you see, I don't know, industry news about, we're all becoming therapists, we're all doing that. And it's because, and I'm going to be very careful about how I put this, I am aware that I am a 30-year-old female in an industry that isn't full of 30-year-old females. So how I feel about what I want to do for my clients is going to be incredibly different, but also based on my life experiences compared to the standard. And I'm not saying average as in like you do average work. I'm saying as in, let's talk about industry averages of 57-year-old that has done the sales and the analytical bit and all of a sudden is now being expected to do the soft stuff. I have no problem with that. That's your experience. That's your life experience. That's, that's good for you. But just because I'm doing something different over here doesn't mean that it's wrong. It's just different.
For sure. And I think that's a good place to take a little break. And we will be back in just a moment with Jo Wall. Hello, I hope you are enjoying the podcast so far. Just a little note from me about some of the brilliant things we've got coming up at NextGen Planners. First of all, we have Good Stock in September, which is our brilliant sustainability conference. If you want to know more information about that and ticket information, you can find that on our website. We have also recently launched business membership, which is very exciting. This is for forward-thinking firms, and it offers a comprehensive suite of tools, training, resources to propel your business forward. And of course, we have our brilliant community, which is filled with amazing content covering all aspects of financial planning. You can find out more about all of these things at our website, www.nextgenplanners.co.uk.
Welcome back. We're talking with Jo Wall about her experiences in financial planning and, interestingly, in financial coaching. Jo, we are, notorious for not taking our own advice, and, doctors wouldn't treat themselves. They would look for another doctor to treat them if they were unwell. What are your thoughts on whether, as financial planners, we should be seeking external assistance with our own planning?
I am a big advocate of that, and it's one of my favorite games to play at conferences or round table events and stuff like that. So, for example, I had this exact conversation at the network that I'm part of. We had a big members event last year, and one of the sessions was talking about how we can improve the industry and how we can do things. And I basically stood up and said, out of the 50 advisors, business owners that were there, how many of you actually have your own financial advisor? I put my hand up, and I think I was the only person that put their hand up. And I was like, in a room full of, very experienced, very educated, very successful business and financial planning firm owners, I was like, to me, that is shocking, because we always have a blinker on our own life. It's never a bad thing to get an outside perspective or a bit of whatever. But also, I'm not being funny. We talk about the power of what we do, whether it is from the wealth management side or the financial coaching side, it doesn't matter. But as an industry, one of the things that we try and do is say about how amazing our services are. Why on earth would you not want to benefit from that yourself? I just don't get it. But I also think that, going back to the kind of earlier point before the break about, you are going to have those people that go, well, the financial advice profession is now becoming too therapist-y and do da-da-da-da-da-da. You go, okay, well, why don't you go and have a financial coaching session and just see what happens? Because, or, this financial advice session, I don't know, maybe, but one of the bits that in the financial, yeah, exactly. And so the coaching course that I did was through Simon Ganetin at Wise Monkey. And one of the things that I really loved about the training was none of it was rocket science. Some of it was really quite enlightening, but one of the bedrocks of what they do with their training is you cannot be a successful coach if you have not experienced what it's like to be coached. So we would have case studies of fake client scenarios. So I'd have to pretend to be whoever that's, Dave that's in his mid-50s that's divorced and blah, 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 blah. Completely different to my own set of circumstances. But then sometimes we got to practice on each other, and we actually were like, right, okay, well, I have this problem that I need coaching through. So actually, yeah, coach me, ask me the questions. I'm here for it. And for me, it not only makes you realize where maybe your strengths and weaknesses are as a coach, because you can go, oh, I asked that question really badly. But then equally, when you are the coachee, not the coach, you can sit there and go, oh my God, I've never been asked that question. Or actually, I've never said that out loud before. And you get to have those kind of moments of going, oh yeah, no, I can see the power in this. I can see what you're trying to achieve. And I do think there are lots of people in the industry that are open-minded, that want to kind of experience it, but don't necessarily want to build it into their business. And it's for all of you naysayers out there that think we're all too therapy, whatever based, come and have a coaching session with me and I'll show you how fun it can be.
Oh, do you know what? And I can tell you firsthand how amazing Jo is, because as a friend, you have a phone call with Jo and you tell her your woes. Next thing you know, she'll be asking a coaching question. And I'm sort of 20 minutes into moaning about my life. And I suddenly go, you've done it to me again. But it feels amazing. So even if you do it just to develop your friendships.
Do you think, Joe, do you think that there's a place for, so in the regulated exams, this to be built in to the part of the qualification, or an element of this to be built in?
Yes, I do. And I think there's two ways that you can look at it, right? Because from a regulatory perspective, and this is me being a bit cynical, but again, people that watch the morning commute will know that I'm ever the cynic, but also ever the optimist at the same time. Spend my life out on fences. But for me, a lot of what we do from a compliance perspective is to cover ourselves and to protect ourselves should something go wrong. And I get that. I respect it for various different reasons, but I think we're approaching it incorrectly. And where I think potentially you could bring, say, some of the coaching side into the qualifications and the exams is objection handling. Those soft skills of being able to, whether it's a client not wanting to invest in something because they, I don't know, misunderstand it and they're like, no, don't want to do it and just arguing you for the sake of arguing, or whatever it might be, or because something genuinely has gone wrong and therefore you need to deal with a bit of a tough situation. That's where potentially I could see as like a starting point, entry level, bring the coaching bit in of going, let's get to the root of the problem. This is what you're saying. Going back to that client example of, I need to talk to you about my pension. No, you don't need to talk to me about your pension. You need to talk to me about all the things that you're stressing about. It's just that it's coming out on the surface as, I need to talk to you about my pension, or I've got a problem with this. And that's where potentially you could, because I think the exams are all about kind of, from a regulatory perspective, what process do you need to follow? What do you need to document? How do you need to cover yourselves? What, you know, how do we protect consumers? There is an element of that in all of the regulated exams. Potentially as an easy in, you could then go, right, well, let's bring that bit of coaching in. Let's bring that bit of objection handling in, understanding how to challenge clients in a really gentle way of going, well, actually, maybe what you're saying isn't quite what you mean, but not necessarily patronizing them or condescending them at the same time. I do think, though, that it also there is the potential that if you're going to do it, it needs to be done properly, and therefore it needs to be a module within ANDIL itself. So, for example, I did all of my qualifications through the CII. That's just the route that I chose, and it's just the route that made sense for me. But I am not someone that does, like, I'm dyslexic, so I find studying really difficult, but I found a way that worked for me, and I'm lucky that I know how I work. And sitting an exam, writing answers is not how I excel. Talking about things is. And so I don't understand why we don't have an element of some of the soft skills stuff that also allows people to kind of hone those skills a little bit, which is ultimately what the exams are there for, apart from being a regulatory tick box to be able to say that you're qualified. If you're someone that is doing your regulated exams to get qualified, to be able to advise or be client facing, eventually you need to go through the competent advisor scheme somewhere, whether that's through an employer or whatever it might be. I think it's remiss that we are not including anything that is then soft skills based, when 90% of people, and that is a made up statistic, but it's a vast majority of people that have struggled with gaining their CAS is because they're being let down from a soft skills perspective. They've got the exams, they've got the technical knowledge. What they struggle with is articulating it and explaining it and playing it and keeping it as simple as possible. But also it's then, how do you get really good, clean, but also robust and in-depth objectives out of people? Got to ask the right questions.
Yeah, and that's interesting because of the route that you go into financial planning. So Taylor, you and Joe are very similar in that you became self-employed after you'd got your qualification. So you didn't have that company of other advisors where you could do role plays and practice, and they would teach you the soft skills. And I know when I first started advising, I actually went through an apprenticeship. So we had to do sort of role plays as part of that. And that was really useful. But when I actually first became a financial planner, they didn't have the time within the firm to train me. So they put me onto Catherine Morgan's course, where I did the coaching as a way of teaching me soft skills. And it was only at that point where I really realised actually where I was maybe monopolizing conversation because of that need to look like I knew what I was talking about, or learning that leaving quiet and becoming comfortable with it, which I'm still absolutely not comfortable with, but I can fake it till I make it. And it's those soft skills should be part of the sort of practical sign off. Because you think about, if you go to university, you'll do your degree, and at the end you normally have a thesis or a module where you then talk, you present, and they will give you a sign off. That's normally a fundamental part of doing your degree, and the same with any sort of apprenticeship or practical qualifications. So why aren't we doing it at diploma level? Because essentially you go, here's your diploma, off you go. Odds are you're going to get a lot of rejection because you're going to absolutely bombard people with information because that's what you think that they need. But actually, the coaching, even just a little snippet of it, just teaches you that human element. And, you know, all we get in the CII exams at the moment is a little bit in AO4, where you talk about confirmation bias or herding or some of the like behavioral finance stuff. And we just need to go that little bit deeper.
Yeah, I totally agree. And I don't think it'd actually necessarily be that complicated to do, because if you look at the likes of, say, a solar accreditation, for example, you have to be able to demonstrate that you've got the exams and the qualifications and the experience. But a massive part of it is then the soft skills, is then being able to demonstrate that you can handle people that are in maybe slightly more vulnerable circumstances, or that there is that extra level of care that's needed. And it's a really rigorous process. And I'm not saying that I want the CII and the LIBF and whoever else to start making it as tough as the solar accreditation stuff, but you've got a format there. You don't need to reinvent the wheel. Like, it doesn't need to be any more complicated than that. But I just think if there just needs to be a bit of joined up thinking. You see what the FCA is trying to do with consumer duty and things like that, and you go, okay, that's great, but it still doesn't necessarily go fast enough. And I can hear the naysayers in the back going, we're not therapists. And I'm not saying we need to be therapists, but that doesn't necessarily mean that we can't use some of the skills and the training that's out there as a way to build these more well-rounded kind of advisors and planners and wealth managers. Because even a wealth manager that is more about the assets and the investments is still going to have to handle a complaint at some point. Regardless, you're still going to get, even if you do everything perfectly, there is always going to be someone that just isn't happy because something somewhere hasn't quite worked out. And I'm not saying that the only thing, I'm not trying to reduce coaching to just objection handling and handling complaints, but for me, it's that thing of like, it's transferable skills, right? Or if you do a module in communication of some form, that is only going to work well for you. And actually, it's probably one of the easiest to practice. Like, Claire and I have had conversations about coaching courses previously, and she very kindly said about the fact that like I kind of coach her every now and again, and it's more so she's like, I wish I could coach my friends. And I was like, yeah, but you see, that's what you do. You practice it with people. You ask interesting questions, and you become interested in people. And I'm very much aware of the fact that I'm on a podcast and I'm doing a lot of talking, which I can talk for England. You guys know I can. But from a coaching perspective, actually the power is in not being the one talking, asking the question and shutting up.
Yeah.
And it's being able to understand that.
For sure. And there's plenty more questions that we'd like to ask you, but we are running out of time. As you said, you can get Jo on anything, and no, you're going to be fine. She will give you what you're looking for. She can talk about anything. And it's been a pleasure to listen to all of it. But my final question for you before we round this off is, for someone who was self-confessed not having a plan at the beginning of launching your own endeavours, do you have one for the future? Is there something that you're working towards, or do you find it that you're just like, let me just see what's important to me, and let me walk towards where I feel compelled to move in a certain direction? What does the future look like for you?
I definitely have more of a plan than I did when I first started. So I feel like we're taking decent strides towards being somewhat successful. For me, I think I almost needed to prove it to myself that it was possible before I kind of like really ran with it. And I've got my CAS status. I've got a handful of really lovely dedicated clients, like that one that I gave you. I kind of use as a bit of a case study. She is bloody fantastic, and she is an ideal client in more ways than one because she like shouts about me from the rooftop. So like all of her friends have signed up and are inquiring, and that for me is amazing, because I can take massive pride in the fact that the average age of my clients is 36. Like that in itself is like, I'm so proud of that, and I want to maintain that. So my plan is basically taking what I've done for the last 12 to 18 months and building and refining and making sure that I can get it as slick as possible. Potentially take on another advisor / planner / coach, whatever we want to call ourselves. I don't necessarily have like really, really big business plans in the sense of I don't have a target AUM that I want to reach. I don't have big, like the standard kind of financial planning type targeting bits for the business as such. But for me, I want to continue finding ways to bridge that gap between the financial coaching space, the classic financial advice piece, and being able to get people interested and engaged in it much earlier on in the process. So my plan for the next 12 months is to basically build on the progress that I've made already. So make sure that I am being able to offer the things that I want to offer people, but also being mindful of the fact that we do have things like regulatory changes coming in, and there's all sorts of stuff. And then, you know, there's also kind of at some point, it would be nice if I properly actually started paying myself, because I'm like paying myself like a peppercorn rent still. And I can't keep using the excuse of, oh, but it increases my relatability with my clients. Like it's fine. So I think it's just a bit of raising the profile of the brand and raising the profile of what I'm trying to achieve. And that's from like the outside of the industry perspective. Inside the industry, what I want to try and do over the next, say, 12 to 18 months is show people that it can be done, and that it can be done cost effectively, and that I'm not turning around and saying to all the naysayers, well, it's really obvious, it's really easy, why aren't you doing it? It's more to say, look, it is possible, and actually you don't have to have all the answers, you don't have to do it yourselves, but I respect you for what you're doing. Let me educate you on what I'm doing and why it works and and where the power is. So yeah, that's my plan for the next 12 to 18 months. But I know that that's super intangible.
No, I know. I mean, I'm excited to see what happens, and I'm sure, you know, that will evolve and change with different things that come in and different things that excite you and you feel motivated by. But yes, for now, thank you so much for joining us and sharing your experiences and your thoughts. It's been a pleasure talking to you.
It's been really, really good fun. So thank you so much for having me. And I'm really proud I didn't swear. So I load on these things and I'm like, oh no. So I'm very proud of myself.
Well done, Jo. Thank you. And thank you everybody for listening. That was our latest episode of That NextGen Planners Podcast. If you want to catch any earlier episodes, you can get them on Spotify, on Apple, on YouTube, and on our website, www.nextgenplanners.co.uk, where you can find out loads about our brilliant community. But for now, goodbye, and we can't wait to see you next time. Thank you for listening to this episode of the NextGen Planners Podcast. If you enjoyed this podcast, you can find all of our previous episodes on Spotify, Apple, YouTube, and on our website. Also, there is where you can find even more information about our brilliant community. And finally, if you can, do leave us a review. It really does help to grow the podcast.